Kevin MacIntyre was from a family with strong ties to this town and to Donegal County Council going back to his grandfather Andrew. Kevin was involved in many projects locally, such as his efforts to retain a secondary school in Lifford, his efforts with others to help restore the roof of the old courthouse, and his involvement in the setting up of Highland Radio. His employment with P&T had a very positive influence on P&T to enable the Defence Forces obtain this campus. We will shortly hear the role that Kevin had within this military post. And others who have known Kevin in that role, I'll now ask to speak. The first speaker I'll call is Lt Col.Stephen Morgan, Officer Commanding the 28th Infantry Battalion. And I understand there's a young officer, he too served here. So please, Lt Col.Stephen Morgan.
Councillor Crawford, I am assembled guest. I'm truly honoured to represent the 28th Battalion here today, and it is a reflection on the importance that we held Kevin in, because I was never fortunate enough to meet him since he passed in 1989, and I only arrived here in 1994, and as a young dub who thought he knew everything, I relied on the vast majority of people that are here today to teach me that not only did I not know everything, I didn't know anything. The 28th Battalion and our RDF, which Kevin would have served in at the time, would have been the 24th Battalion, but we're all part of the one unit now. And we have never forgotten Kevin or his importance to the unit or his importance to the Defence Forces. And those of you that served here, you'd all remember just in the door Kevin's picture home. Kevin's picture still hangs in the officers' mess in Finner Camp, and every year in November when we remember our dead, we remember Kevin, and his name is read out on the roll call of honour. 28th Battalion have been here since 1973, in around then, and unfortunately due to cutbacks we left here in 2008. But we've never forgotten our roots in Lifford, and still today a lot of people still serve from Lifford, and we are delighted, and it's a testament to our connection with the RDF and our connection with Lifford that we have so many of our former members still here coming to honour Kevin today. It's a good job I probably never met Kevin, because I lived upstairs, so he'd probably give out to me. But it is an absolute honour to represent the unit. It's maybe someday we might get an expansion, and maybe someday we can come back and take Lifford off the council again, because we would love to be operating out of here. This is probably one of the best barracks anyone has ever served in. And just coming back, I had a long list of lies that I thought I was going to be able to tell everyone, but seeing as they all know me, I can't tell too many of them. But really and truly, Lifford, and I did 13 years in my first stint from being a lieutenant. I was privileged enough to be the Company 2IC of Lifford, and we're still a family. Like, you know, just meeting up with the lads here, it's great. The memories are flooding back. Seeing the house, seeing MacIntyre House, the Priory School, and the old admin block. The memories kept flooding back, and it is really, really great. And we thank you for his service. We acknowledge his memory, and I can assure you, as the commanding officer of the unit, Kevin will never be forgotten. So, with that, thank you very much.
Pat Early, retired former Battalion Commander, who served here as Post Commander and I also serve with Kevin to say a few words. Councillor Crawford, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be here today at this great gathering in honour of Kevin. The first time I would have met Kevin would have been the rifle ranges in Finner Camp in probably 1966. Kevin that time was the lieutenant in charge of the A Company FCA shooting rifle team. I would have been the most junior private on the B Company rifle team. Kevin's opposite number in our team would be a man called Captain Cecil King from Ballyshannon. Over the coming years, we would have managed to joust on the ranges in Finner Camp between A and B Company. And in 1970, then I got commissioned into the FCA as a second lieutenant, and I would have got to know Kevin quite a lot better. And in the coming years, up until say 1975, again we would have met many times on the ranges in Finner Camp. Then Cecil King, he got promoted and went on to BOC B Company, and I remained as the officer on the B Company rifle team. Now, while that was going on, unfortunately, the Northern Ireland situation was deteriorating, and you had the situation where the civil rights escalated up until you had the period of the Troubles. And during that time, you had regular troops were brought onto the border because there were various incidents happening. You had refugees coming across the border after being burned out in Belfast and facilitated in Finner Camp. A little bit like what's happening now, unfortunately, in the Ukraine. And there was various other incidents, but there would have been one particular incident that happened in Ballyshannon that is relevant to, I suppose, why we're here today. There was an attempt to put a bomb on one of the pylons in Kathleen Falls Power Station by a man called Thomas Francis McDowell. He was a member of the UVF, and while on the pylon he got electrocuted and died 5 days later in the Shield Hospital in Ballyshannon. As a result of that, then the powers that be decided that there should be security on various vital installations like Kathleen Falls, Cliff Power Station, Arigna, the TV Mask and Trustmore, and various other locations along the border and the Dublin vicinity. So a big demand on the regular troops who were up here at the time, and as a result, members of the FCA, as it was that time, started helping out doing security duties in some of those places. I can remember on a Saturday doing duty in Kathleen Falls Power Station. So that evolved into a situation where members of the FCA became involved in what was called full-time security duties, which meant that signed up for 6 months, then you were supposed to get the mob for a day and sign on for another 6 months. But somewhere in the midst of time, that seemed to cease to exist. Then in 1975 it was, I became one of those people. I joined the 28th Infantry Battalion on full-time security duty. And in 1979 then, Kevin followed me in to the 28th Battalion. Now I think that's about the only time I can remember that Kevin ever followed me anywhere. I was generally following him. During that period while Kevin was here in Lifford, in 1973 then we had a situation where, with all the things that were happening in various parts of the border, the government decided that they needed more troops along the border, and 3 new infantry battalions were created, one in Dundalk, one in Cavan, and the 28th Infantry Battalion in Finner Camp, which had 3 companies, and there was also a company, B Company in Rockall House in Letterkenny, which was also the headquarters
of the 28th Infantry Battalion FCA. Then in 1974, decided that because of the locals getting restless here and Campbell's Hump across the border, that they needed troops in this area, and the old Prior School was taken over, and the A Company moved into what was the old Prior School. And conditions, to say the least, were fairly basic then. But in 1979, when Kevin joined up, he was posted here to Lifford and would have spent the next 10 years here in Lifford. Officers came and went fairly fast. Generally, the post commander right here, maybe on promotion. And I suppose it's not unfair to say that probably from the day he arrived, he was planning his escape. But Kevin would have been the continuity here over those years. And one of the major events that would occur here in the local area, which some of you may remember, there was a major bomb detonated on Lifford Bridge, intended for the Campbell's Hump, but it detonated on the bridge. And it done a significant amount of damage to the town of Lifford here, damaging infrastructure, blowing in windows, all that type of thing. And as a result of that, it made national headlines, and the GOC from Athlone would have been up here to see how similar events could have been prevented. He'd have been accompanied by the like of the CO from Finner, CO here in Lifford Military Post, and I'm sure Kevin had the CO convinced that in the tour around town he would have to be involved. But again, Kevin would have had a lot of local knowledge to impart to the like of the GOC and advising what would be required around the local area. And as it turned out, it would appear he got to know the GOC quite well. And in ensuing inspections, the GOC would visit his units at least once a year. And when he would come here, well, Kevin would be the familiar face that he would know. And obviously, as I say, got to know him. So then in time, moving along to 1988, the full-time security duty was in vogue for approximately 20 years at that time. And the authorities decided they would need to rectify this and do something with these guys that were FCA personnel but serving in the army, some of them for almost 20 years. And thankfully for the like of myself, they gave us a very, very generous offer. We could either take a golden handshake or we could join the Permanent Defence Forces with our rank and all our service. And 1988, as some of you might remember, unemployment was fairly high at the time in Ireland, and the army was being very well looked after because of the need that was going at the time. So it was an exceptionally generous offer. And to start the ball rolling, the first meeting we had, and this is just to give you a flavour, hopefully, of the kind of individual that Kevin was. We had a meeting and we were called together in McKee Barracks in Dublin. And for those of you who wouldn't be that familiar with McKee Barracks, we're the most senior barracks in the Defence Forces, and most of the major senior officers would be there, including the Chief of Staff, for example. It was certainly my first time in McKee and maybe Kevin's, but I arrived here in Lifford and Kevin chauffeured us up to McKee Barracks. In the meantime, he had made arrangements with a man who we both knew quite well, Colonel Pat Early. He was about the only one we knew in McKee when we got there. And he had been in this part of the world from the early 60s. He was the training officer in B Company in Donegal County, when the companies had a regular training officer as part of the regular staff. And he actually lived with his family in my own village in Mount Charles, and would have signed me in as a very young man to the FCA and B Company in Donegal Town, and handed me over to the tender loving care of Quartermaster Alec Monaghan and Jim Malloy. So Kevin would have known him because he served quite a lot in Donegal, finishing in Donegal as OC the 28th Infantry Battalion in Finner Camp. So we'd arranged to meet him in McKee Barracks. So when we arrived in McKee, he met us, and we were in civvies. He had to change his clothes, and he directed us into the bar in McKee, which is very busy at lunchtime. In we went. Nobody knew us, and very few probably particularly was too interested in who we were. So Kevin ordered his wee black bush, as it would have been, and we sat ourselves down, 2 lost lambs in the mess. Not very long there, and who walks in? Only the Chief of Staff, who was the former GOC here in the West when situations were getting hot here in Finner or in Lifford. So he was over and probably sat down in his reserve spot. And no sooner had he looked around than who does he spot? Only his good friend Kevin. And immediately came over. Now, if Kevin was telling this story, I would take it with a pinch of salt. Big handshake for Kevin and a great welcome. And obviously had a fair idea why we were there. Sat down and joined us. I got introduced. And about 10 or 15 minutes later, Colonel Rowan arrived and was more than pleased to see that his guests were being very well looked after by no less a person than the Chief of Staff. So that gives you a little idea of the type of person Kevin was and how he loved and got to know people. And needless to say, Colonel Rowan enjoyed it very much when Kevin related how he knew the Chief so well. So fast forwards then, some months later, we were all gathered together for 2 weeks this time in Redmore Barracks in Galway. And being an army fortnight, there had to be programs and arrangements and all, because there was people coming from army headquarters and the Department of Defence to speak to us and let us know how this transition was going to occur. But as the week progressed, I think Kevin was getting a bit bored with the proceedings. And for those of you who mightn't be familiar with the Defence Forces, a Wednesday afternoon in the Defence Forces is generally regarded as a recreational half day, which can often be loosely interpreted. But what it really means is that you're supposed to be involved in things like playing football, weighted slotting, Finner Camp, for example, where you go to the pool for an hour, and there was even military transport provided in case you would want to avoid it. But Kevin anyway felt that I think that we should have having a recreational half day in Galway. But that wasn't to be. We had a lot more important things to do because we had a very enthusiastic captain, regular captain in charge of us. And that particular afternoon, we were scheduled for no less than a lecture on the results of atomic fallout. And I think Kevin must have came to the conclusion if Putin or somebody like them dropped an atomic bomb on us in Galway, we weren't going to have to worry about the fallout. But anyway, redemption was at hand, because some years previously, 2 young lieutenants arrived here in Lifford military post, and I think they were made in the same mould as Kevin. And Kevin decided to take them under his wing, and I think they had a fairly good time. I had heard quite a few stories about them before that. And as it turned out, one of them now was stationed in Galway, and as luck should have it, he was the guy that was scheduled for doing this lecture. And I think Kevin persuaded him that maybe he should take out the shortcut. So anyway, we presented ourselves to the lecture room, and he arrived looking very much the part with his briefcase, got himself organised for the lecture, and was just about 3 minutes into the lecture when, unfortunately, what happened but didn't he drop the bomb, and the lecture came to a very abrupt end. Now, with the present company here, I can't really explain how he ended the lecture, but suffice to say, himself and Kevin actually panicked, and it's the only time I ever seen Kevin panicking, and decided that the best thing we would do was head into Galway and warn the good citizens of Galway what was likely coming down the tracks for them. So I was thinking to myself, that's great, recreational afternoon, I'll go for a run. So I was just heading for the door when Kevin, he spotted me, and he says, "Hey boy, where do you think you're off to?" I thought I might go for a run, Kevin. "Oh, no run for you, you're driving." So we loaded up Kevin's car, headed for Galway, and visited various establishments, and ended up in Park House Hotel around 8 o'clock. And after a very good meal, it was decided that we needed to get back to Renmore because we had to have a debrief. And at that time of the night, the only place that was liable to be open was the bar. So we back to the bar, had our debrief, which was very, very brief indeed, because our instructor decided as we were all there, even though there was a few casualties, self-inflicted wounds, the bomb must have been a dud, seeing as we were there. So that ended that course. From there then, we had another 2-week get-together in June 1989, but unfortunately by then, Kevin was unable to be involved. It was our preparation for our commissioning ceremony. Kevin, by that time, his illness had overtaken him and he was in hospital. So instead of being able to join us at the commissioning, Kevin received his commissioning in the hospital. And 4 months later, in October, he passed away and in Letterkenny Hospital. And he would have received a full military funeral benefiting his rank from Lifford out to Morlock by his comrades in the 28th Battalion and in the 24th Battalion FCA. So that's a little bit about Captain Kevin MacIntyre and the man that I knew. And subsequently, the officers' mess here in Lifford Military Post was named in his honour. But obviously, today is all about Captain Kevin MacIntyre, and I just want to finish off on that theme. And I was thinking that if there's a place we go after all this, I can imagine Kevin's there now today, and he's surrounded by a crowd of his buddies. I don't know who is in the crowd, but I would guess there's a few Crawfords anyway, and very likely Slim McCusker and Big Tommy Howard are certainly there. And Kevin has his wee black bush in his hand. He's regaling them with his stories, embellished as only Kevin could. But he's also keeping a very close eye on these proceedings, because I can be certain that Kevin is very pleased that his name is going to remain connected to Lifford through this very nice guest to the reinstatement of MacIntyre House. Because in spite of all, Kevin, one thing about Captain Kevin MacIntyre, he was, no matter where he went, he was a very, very proud Lifford man, and he would be very pleased to see the gathering here today and the way he's remembered. And just to finish off, knowing Kevin as I would have known him, in his own very modest and mischievous way, I'm sure he's also thinking in the back of his mind, well, sure, it's the very least I deserve. Wasn't it me got it built for them? Thanks very much.
The purpose that we're here for this evening is to reinstate the plaque to Captain Kevin MacIntyre on MacIntyre House behind us here. And it's a day of mixed emotions, I'm sure, for his family. But at this stage now, I think that we must ask a member of Kevin's family to say a few words, and then we'll unveil the plaque behind us. So I call on Anne-Marie to do that, please.
Hi everybody. All I can say is thank you all so much for turning up here today. We weren't expecting a crowd at all. We were just expecting ourselves and a few other people. But it's just lovely to see old faces, new faces, and you know, the fact that you've all got together to remember my dad in such a lovely way. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Eugene, for everything. Thank you, Gerry, for everything, for all you've done for us. And we're very proud of what you've done for Dad today. Thank you all very much. Web curtains.
Way up there and open that.
Here, get over Brendan up as well.
We'll get out of the way, Brad. You can stand
Big for Brendan.
Brad, you get you in there, Brad. No,
Here, Brendan.
you can hold.
You better let the chairman in there too.
Here, Brendan, just a second.
Too many McIntyres that you do a wider lens.
Wide angle lens. Thanks.
Good stuff, Gerry.
Sounds good, folks.
Thanks, Gerry.
Could go on a stick with Roshi.
Yeah.
I'll do all right there.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
To a conclusion here in this place, I would say thanks to all who helped in any way with today's events, people who turned up here, to all of Gillespie area manager and to Patsy Lafferty, and to Charlie Tunney, who played a very big part in all of this. And thanks to Tommy, Niall and Paul and Facilities for organising the parking and helping out at the event, and Fergal for assisting with printing, and thank you to the media for attending. And there's one last job here. To a former employee of the Donegal County Council, to someone who's played a major part in having the prior passed to the council and who works tirelessly on many local projects. He's known to many within the Defence Forces as the last company commander of A Company 24th Infantry Battalion, FCA, and the first company commander of A Company 58th Reserve Infantry Battalion. His efforts to have the prior return to the council and his help with this event truly cannot be overstated. Eugene McCusker. Again now, just to say thanks to everybody for turning out, and again to thank all the people who served here for the service that they give to this community. And I just want to note, well, it's not in the notes, but when we have present here Kevin's brother Brendan, and Brendan's actually Kevin's twin, so it's very nice to have Brendan's family members here with us as well. If we can make our way down now to the old courthouse, there'll be some light refreshments there and a very interesting display of old photographs connected to the FCA and to Captain MacIntyre. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gerry.